Don't you ever say her name again. Jimin's furious voice shattered the silence of the abandoned rooftop as the cold night wind whipped across the city skyline. Before Jungkook could answer, Jimin's fist crashed into his jaw with enough force to send him stumbling backward against the rusted safety rail. The metallic clang echoed through the darkness while rain began to fall in scattered drops, soaking their clothes almost instantly. Jungkook slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, refusing to fight back. "I never wanted this," he whispered. Those 5 words only fueled Jimin's anger. "You stole everything from me." Lightning split the sky, briefly illuminating 2 broken faces that had once smiled together through countless memories. Neither of them noticed the woman standing behind the rooftop door, tears streaming down her cheeks as she silently listened to every word. Months earlier, nobody could have imagined their friendship would end like this. Jimin and Jungkook had been inseparable for over a decade. They trained together, laughed together, protected each other from scandals, and carried each other's secrets through years of exhausting schedules and endless performances. To everyone around them, they were brothers rather than friends. Yet every strong bond hides invisible fractures. Jimin possessed a gentle heart, but he feared abandonment more than anything else. As a child, people had entered his life only to disappear. Those scars never truly healed. Instead, he learned to hide his insecurities beneath warm smiles and endless kindness. Jungkook carried different wounds. He had spent years believing that sacrificing his own happiness was the only way to protect those he loved. Whenever conflict appeared, he stepped aside, convincing himself that suffering in silence was better than hurting someone else. Neither realized those habits would eventually destroy them. It all began during a charity concert in Busan. Thousands of fans filled the massive arena with glowing lights that looked like stars scattered across the earth. Behind the stage, while everyone rushed between rehearsals, Jungkook accidentally bumped into a volunteer carrying several boxes of medical supplies. "I'm so sorry." The young woman laughed softly. "No injuries, only my pride." Her name was Yuna. She wasn't famous. She wasn't interested in celebrities. She worked as a volunteer for children recovering from serious illnesses. Something about her calm eyes fascinated Jungkook immediately. Unlike everyone else, she looked at him as though he were simply another human being. Not an idol. Not a superstar. Just Jungkook. Over the following weeks, their conversations became longer. Sometimes they met at the children's hospital after Jungkook secretly finished his schedule. He played guitar for young patients. Yuna painted colorful murals across empty walls. The children adored both of them. For the first time in years, Jungkook felt completely at peace. He never intended to hide their friendship, but he also knew how dangerous rumors could become, especially because Yuna had another secret, one she had begged him never to reveal. Several years earlier, she and Jimin had once loved each other. Quietly. Deeply. Secretly. The relationship had ended before either of them confessed everything they truly felt. Their careers. Their fears. Public pressure. Every obstacle slowly pulled them apart until silence became easier than goodbye. Jimin believed she had moved overseas. Yuna believed Jimin no longer loved her. Neither knew the other had spent years regretting that farewell. When fate unexpectedly reunited Yuna and Jungkook instead, history quietly prepared its cruelest joke. Jungkook discovered the truth only after finding an old photograph inside Yuna's sketchbook. On the back was a handwritten sentence. Jungkook's heart sank. "You knew him?" Yuna nodded slowly. "I loved him." Silence filled the room. "I still do," she admitted. Those words should have ended everything. Jungkook should have walked away. Instead, he stayed. Not because he wanted to steal someone else's love, but because every passing day made leaving impossible. He admired her kindness, her courage, her quiet resilience. And despite knowing her heart still carried old scars, his own feelings continued growing beyond his control. That realization terrified him. For weeks he avoided both Jimin and Yuna. He barely slept. His cheerful laughter disappeared. Even the other members noticed something had changed. "What's wrong with you lately?" "I'm just tired." It was always the same answer. a lie repeated until it sounded believable. Meanwhile, Yuna fought her own battle. She realized Jungkook's feelings long before he admitted them. She also recognized the pain hidden inside herself whenever Jimin's name appeared online. Every photograph reopened wounds she thought had healed. One rainy afternoon, she stood alone outside the hospital after work. Jungkook quietly walked beside her beneath a shared umbrella. "You still love him?" She remained silent. "Don't answer." She looked toward the gray sky. "What if I don't know anymore?" That confession haunted Jungkook for days. Hope was dangerous, especially when mixed with guilt. Several weeks later, destiny struck again. During another charity event, Jimin unexpectedly arrived as a surprise guest. Neither moved. Neither breathed. Years of separation collapsed into one heartbeat. Children continued laughing around them. Volunteers carried decorations. Music echoed through the speakers. Yet for those two people, the world disappeared. "Yuna?" She barely whispered his name. "Jimin." Jungkook watched from the opposite side of the room. His chest tightened. He knew exactly what would happen next. Old emotions never truly vanish. They merely wait. Jimin spent the rest of the evening unable to concentrate. He kept searching for opportunities to speak with her. Eventually, they found themselves alone in the hospital garden, surrounded by blooming white lilies. "I searched for you." Yuna looked away. "I thought you stopped caring." "I never stopped." Her eyes slowly filled with tears. Neither noticed Jungkook watching from a distant hallway before quietly turning around and leaving without saying a single word. That night, he walked alone through empty streets until sunrise. Every step felt heavier than the last. He finally accepted the truth. If Yuna still loved Jimin, he had no right to remain between them. The following days became unbearable. Jungkook deliberately distanced himself. He ignored Yuna's messages. He declined invitations. He buried himself in work. Jimin misunderstood everything. He believed Jungkook simply disliked Yuna's return. Then another misunderstanding changed everything forever. One entertainment journalist secretly photographed Jungkook comforting Yuna after she learned one of the children at the hospital had passed away. The image spread across social media within hours. Rumors exploded. Headlines claimed they were secretly dating. Jimin stared at the photograph long into the night. His hands trembled. His heartbeat became painfully uneven. Memories collided with jealousy. Reason lost against emotion. For the first time in his life, he doubted Jungkook, the person he trusted most. The next evening, he sent only one message. "Meet me on the rooftop." Jungkook knew exactly why. Even so, he came. The rain continued pouring over the city as silence stretched between them. Then Jimin asked the question that neither of them was prepared to answer. "Are you in love with her?" Jungkook closed his eyes. The truth could destroy everything. The lie could destroy himself. Several endless seconds passed before he quietly replied, "Yes." The sound of Jimin's fist striking his face echoed into the storm. Rainwater streamed down the rooftop as both men stood frozen, their breathing uneven after the punch that had shattered years of unspoken trust. Jungkook slowly lifted his head, his lip bleeding, yet there was no anger in his eyes. There was only exhaustion, the kind that settled deep inside a soul that had spent too long carrying impossible choices. Jimin's clenched fist trembled. "I trusted you more than anyone," he said, his voice breaking beneath the storm. "If there was one person I believed would never hurt me, it was you." Jungkook swallowed the bitter taste of blood. "I never wanted to hurt you. But you did." The words landed harder than the punch. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Thunder rolled across the sky while the city's lights shimmered through the curtain of rain. It felt as though the entire world had become silent, waiting for someone to undo a mistake that could no longer be erased. Jungkook finally turned away. "I'll leave." Jimin stared after him, unable to answer. Part of him wanted to stop his friend, to demand the truth behind everything, but another part was drowning in jealousy and betrayal. He let Jungkook disappear into the darkness without another word. That night, none of them slept. Jimin returned to his apartment carrying emotions he could no longer control. Every room reminded him of happier days. His eyes settled on Jungkook's bright smile. The memory of that promise felt cruel now. His phone vibrated again. It was another message from Yuna. Please tell me what happened. He stared at the screen for several minutes before locking the phone without replying. He could not bring himself to explain. Not yet. Meanwhile, Yuna stood outside the children's hospital, the cold night air brushing against her face. She had sensed something terrible the moment Jungkook left the charity event earlier that evening. She knew Jimin had asked to meet him. Deep inside, fear whispered that the past had finally caught up with all three of them. The following morning, the atmosphere inside the company building felt unusually heavy. Everyone noticed the distance between Jimin and Jungkook. Normally, they greeted each other first before practice. Today, they barely exchanged a glance. Even simple conversations became painfully awkward. Taeyong frowned as he watched them from across the rehearsal room. This doesn't feel right, he quietly said. Namjoon nodded. They've never acted like this before. No one knew the reason, but everyone felt it. During dance rehearsal, Jimin made a small mistake for the first time in weeks. Frustrated, he stopped the music halfway through. I'm taking a break. Jungkook watched him leave. He wanted to explain everything. That he had never tried to steal anyone's happiness. That his feelings had grown despite every effort to bury them. But every explanation sounded like an excuse. Sometimes the truth hurt more than silence. Outside the studio, Jimin wandered aimlessly until he reached a quiet park nearby. The trees swayed gently in the summer breeze. Children laughed in the distance. For a brief moment, he remembered another park many years ago. Yuna had been sitting beneath a cherry blossom tree, sketching flowers in a notebook while he practiced dance moves nearby. She had laughed every time he lost his balance. You'll become famous someday, she had told him. He had laughed back. Only if you promise to stay beside me. She had smiled instead of answering. He never realized that silence would eventually become their goodbye. The memory left him feeling hollow. Later that afternoon, Yuna finally gathered the courage to visit the company building. She hoped to speak with both of them before things became worse. When she entered the lobby, she unexpectedly met Jimin first. Neither spoke immediately. Yuna forced a faint smile. So do you? It was a lie. He looked exhausted. So, is it true? Jimin asked quietly. She frowned. You and Jungkook. Her expression immediately changed. No. Jimin searched her eyes, trying to determine whether she was lying. He loves you. The words surprised even her. She looked down at the floor. I know. And you? Yuna closed her eyes. I don't know what my heart is trying to tell me anymore. The confession only deepened Jimin's confusion. He had expected certainty. Instead, he found another broken heart. Before either of them could continue, Jungkook stepped out of the elevator. He froze. Seeing Jimin and Yuna standing together felt like watching a dream collapse into reality. Neither man spoke. Yuna looked from one to the other. This has gone too far. Jimin folded his arms. Then tell me the truth. I've tried. No, Jimin replied. You've both hidden the truth. Yuna's voice trembled. I never planned any of this. Jungkook stepped forward. It's my fault. She immediately shook her head. No. I should have walked away the moment I learned about your past. Jimin's breathing grew heavier. So you admit it. I admit that I fell in love. Silence filled the lobby. Employees passing nearby quietly avoided looking at them, sensing the painful tension. Jungkook continued speaking. But I never asked her to choose me. Yuna looked at him with tears gathering in her eyes. He smiled sadly. You still deserve to hear everything. She understood what he meant before he finished. No. He nodded. You still love him. Jimin's eyes widened. The world around him seemed to disappear. Yuna lowered her head. I never stopped caring. The confession struck all three of them differently. For Jimin, it reignited hope he had buried years ago. For Yuna, it reopened wounds she had struggled to heal. For Jungkook, it became the final confirmation that letting go was the only path left. That evening, Jungkook quietly returned to the children's hospital one last time. The young patients greeted him with bright smiles, unaware that his own heart was quietly breaking. He played a gentle melody on his guitar while several children sang along. Yuna watched from the hallway, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She finally understood the depth of Jungkook's sacrifice. He was not giving up because he had stopped loving her. He was giving up because he loved both of them enough to step aside. When the song ended, one little girl tugged gently on Jungkook's sleeve. "Will you come back tomorrow?" Jungkook knelt beside her and smiled warmly, though his eyes glistened. "I'll always remember all of you." As he walked out of the hospital into the cool evening air, he slipped his phone into his pocket and made a decision that would change every relationship in his life. Without telling anyone, he began preparing to leave Seoul, believing that disappearing was the only way to heal the hearts he had unintentionally broken. The first rays of dawn slipped through the curtains of Jungkook's apartment, but the room felt colder than ever. Half-packed suitcases lay open on the floor. Folded clothes, notebooks, and an old guitar case rested neatly beside the door, as though he had already decided to erase himself from the city that had become both his greatest dream and deepest heartbreak. He paused in front of a small wooden box hidden inside his bookshelf. Inside were years of memories. A faded concert pass from their trainee days. A friendship bracelet Jimin had made by hand after their first successful performance. A handwritten note that simply read, "No matter where life takes us, we'll always be family." Jungkook smiled weakly before carefully closing the lid. Some promises, he thought, were broken not by betrayal, but by circumstances no one could control. Later that morning, the members gathered for another rehearsal. The atmosphere remained painfully quiet. Conversations that once flowed effortlessly had been replaced by short answers and awkward glances. Namjoon finally broke the silence. "Something is happening between you two." Neither Jimin nor Jungkook answered. Taeyong looked from one to the other, concern written across his face. "We're a family," he said softly. "Whatever this is, don't carry it alone." Jungkook forced a polite smile. "I'm just tired." Jimin looked away. He no longer believed that answer. After practice ended, Jimin wandered back to the hospital where he had first seen Yuna again. He found her sitting alone in the hospital garden beneath a blooming magnolia tree, sketchbook resting on her knees. For several moments, he simply watched her draw. "You still sketch flowers?" he said. Yuna looked up, startled. "I never stopped." He sat beside her. The silence between them felt different now, not hostile, but fragile. "I spent years wondering why you disappeared," Jimin admitted. She lowered her pencil. "I didn't disappear." He frowned. "My father became seriously ill. I stayed with him until the very end. I wanted to contact you so many times, but every time I picked up my phone, I convinced myself your life had already moved on." Jimin closed his eyes. "I waited." She looked at him in surprise. "I waited for messages that never came." Neither of them realized that what had separated them all those years had not been a lack of love, but a chain of misunderstandings and fear. A tear rolled down Yuna's cheek. "I'm sorry." Jimin gently shook his head. "So am I." For the first time since they reunited, neither of them blamed the other. Across the city, Jungkook stood on the rooftop of the company building, staring at the skyline. The wind carried distant sounds of traffic below, but his thoughts were louder than the city itself. His phone vibrated. It was a message from the volunteer coordinator at the children's hospital. "The children asked if you'll visit again before you leave." He closed his eyes. He had told no one about his decision to leave Seoul, yet somehow the hospital staff had sensed it. That afternoon, he returned one last time. The children welcomed him with bright smiles, rushing toward him with handmade drawings and colorful paper stars. One little boy handed him a folded picture. "I drew you and Miss Yuna," he said proudly. Jungkook unfolded it slowly. The drawing showed 3 people holding hands beneath a blue sky. On the left was Jungkook. On the right was Yuna. In the middle stood Jimin, smiling. The child tilted his head innocently. "You all looked happiest together." Jungkook felt his chest tighten. Children often saw truths adults were too afraid to face. He thanked the boy and carefully placed the drawing inside his jacket. When he stepped into the hallway, Yuna was waiting. "I heard you're leaving." He smiled gently. "News travels fast." "Why?" "Because staying will only make things harder." She looked at him with tearful eyes. You don't have to disappear. I do. You've done nothing wrong. Jungkook sighed. Maybe not intentionally, but pain doesn't disappear just because it wasn't meant to happen. Yuna stepped closer. You've become someone precious to me. His heart skipped. But she couldn't finish the sentence. He already understood. He reached into his pocket and handed her the drawing the little boy had made. Keep it. She looked down at the picture. I think this is how he sees us. Three people connected not by romance alone, but by compassion, regret, and love in different forms. Yuna's tears finally fell freely. I'm sorry. Jungkook smiled through the ache in his heart. You've apologized enough. He turned and quietly walked away before she could stop him. That evening, Jimin returned to the practice studio hoping to find Jungkook. Instead, he found the rehearsal room completely empty. Only Jungkook's forgotten water bottle remained on the floor. Taeyong entered moments later. Looking for him? Jimin nodded. I need to talk. Taeyong hesitated before speaking. He looked different today. What do you mean? Like someone saying goodbye. Jimin froze. A strange uneasiness settled inside him. For the first time since their argument, anger gave way to fear. He suddenly remembered every sacrifice Jungkook had made over the years. Every time he had quietly stepped back so others could shine. Every time he had smiled while hiding his own pain. Had he misunderstood everything? Unable to ignore the growing anxiety, Jimin drove to Jungkook's apartment. He knocked several times. No answer. Using the spare key Jungkook had given him years ago for emergencies, he slowly opened the door. The apartment was almost empty. The shelves that had once held books and photographs were bare. Several boxes had already been sealed. Near the entrance rested a suitcase. On the dining table lay the small wooden box containing their shared memories. Beside it was a handwritten letter addressed to Jimin. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The envelope had not yet been opened. The anger that had consumed him over the past days dissolved into overwhelming guilt. He realized that while he had been fighting to reclaim a lost love, Jungkook had been quietly preparing to walk away from everyone he loved. With a shaking breath, Jimin carefully opened the envelope, knowing that whatever was written inside would change the way he saw his best friend forever. Jimin unfolded the letter with trembling hands. For a long moment, he simply stared at the familiar handwriting, unable to bring himself to read the first line. The apartment was so quiet that he could hear the ticking of the wall clock and the soft rain tapping against the window. Finally, he took a slow breath. Jimin, if you're reading this, then I wasn't brave enough to say these words while looking into your eyes. His vision blurred almost immediately. You once told me that real friends protect each other, even when it hurts. I believe those words with all my heart. That's why I kept my feelings hidden for so long. I knew about you and Yuna long before you knew I did. Jimin lowered the letter for a moment, his chest tightening. Every sentence felt painfully honest. I never wanted to replace you. I never wanted Yuna to choose between us. If loving someone means seeing them happy, then I hope one day both of you can smile again, even if I'm no longer there to see it. A tear fell onto the paper. Jimin quickly wiped it away before it could blur the ink. Please don't hate yourself because of me. This wasn't anyone's fault. Hearts don't ask permission before they change. I'm leaving because staying would only keep reopening all our wounds. I hope someday you'll forgive me, not for loving her, but for not telling you the truth sooner. The final line broke him. Thank you for being my brother. Jimin slowly folded the letter against his chest. The anger he had carried for days vanished completely, replaced by overwhelming regret. I was wrong, he whispered into the empty room. Without wasting another second, he grabbed his phone and called Jungkook. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried again. And again. Nothing. His heartbeat quickened. Meanwhile, Jungkook stood alone at a quiet train station on the outskirts of Seoul. A small travel bag rested beside his feet, and his guitar case leaned against a nearby bench. The evening sky was painted in shades of orange and purple as announcements echoed through the nearly empty platform. He watched families embracing before departures. Children laughed. Couples promised to meet again. He smiled sadly. Some goodbyes happened without anyone noticing. His phone vibrated repeatedly. Jimin. He stared at the screen but could not answer. If he heard Jimin's voice now, he knew he would never be able to leave. He gently switched the phone off. Back in the city, Yuna arrived at Jungkook's apartment after receiving a brief message from Taeyong asking if she knew where he was. She found Jimin sitting silently on the floor, the letter still in his hands. "What happened?" she asked softly. Jimin looked up. His eyes were red from crying. "He never tried to take you away from me." Yuna's expression slowly fell. "He was protecting us." Jimin handed her the letter. As she read each sentence, tears rolled freely down her cheeks. "I should have told him how grateful I was," she whispered. "You still can," Jimin replied, standing to his feet. "We have to find him." The two of them hurried outside. Taeyong, Namjoon, Jin, Hoseok, Yoongi, and the rest of the members joined the search after learning what had happened. For hours they drove across Seoul, visiting every place Jungkook loved. The riverside where he often wrote songs. The small cafe where he liked to drink coffee after rehearsals. The children's hospital. Everywhere they went, people smiled warmly when they mentioned his name. He was here earlier. He left not long ago. He seemed happy, but also very lonely. Each answer brought them close, yet never close enough. Late that evening, Jimin suddenly remembered something. The observatory. Everyone looked at him. "When we were trainees, we promised that if life ever became too difficult, we'd meet there before making any life-changing decision." Without hesitation, they drove toward the hill overlooking the city. The wind was stronger there. The lights of Seoul stretched endlessly below like a sea of stars. Jungkook stood quietly beside the railing, his hands resting in his pockets. He had not boarded the train. Something inside him had led him back to the one place that had always felt like home. He heard hurried footsteps behind him. Turning around slowly, he saw Jimin. Neither spoke. For several seconds, only the wind filled the silence. Then Jimin walked forward until they stood only a few steps apart. "I'm sorry." The words were barely louder than a whisper. "I blamed you without listening." Jungkook lowered his eyes. "You had every reason." "No." Jimin shook his head. "I let jealousy become louder than our friendship." Jungkook smiled faintly. "I should have trusted you with the truth." Both men laughed quietly through their tears. It was the first genuine smile either of them had shared in days. Yuna approached more slowly. She looked at Jungkook before turning to Jimin. "I'm the one who kept running from my past," she admitted. "Both of you carried the weight of my silence." Jimin gently reached for her hand. "We all made mistakes." She nodded. "But we don't have to keep making them." Jungkook looked out across the glowing city. For the first time in many days, the tightness in his chest began to fade. He realized that forgiveness did not erase pain.